The title of today's message is, What's Your Tell? I have heard from other people that a tell is a gambling term. For unconscious motions a person makes that gives away the strength of their hand. Now, Brother McKinley, I'm sure, knows about a tell not from card play, but rather from being an investigator. Investigators will tell you that a tell is something a person does when they're in an interview to show that they're lying. It gives them away. But today is neither about riverboats nor interrogation rooms, but a different kind of tell. And I'm going to get to it in just a minute. When we were last together, we left Joshua speaking with the pre-incarnate Jesus who had identified himself as a commander of the Lord's army. We left Joshua barefoot by Jericho, awaiting instructions from his commander. I'm going to start off in Joshua 6:1. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. Jericho was encompassed by about 7 acres, but it was a fortress. Soon, maybe next week, who knows, we're going to talk about Rahab. Rahab was a woman that when Joshua sent spies in, she told them that Jericho was terrified of the Israelites. The people were so scared that they locked themselves inside the city gates. That's what it means when it says that none went out. And that's really interesting because Joshua has probably seen Jericho before. When he went under Moses' leadership, Joshua went in as a spy 40 years before this moment. And if you remember, there was 10 spies who came back with a bad report. And that bad report is recorded in Numbers 13:28. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong, the cities are fortified and large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Considering the location and the mention of the Canaanites earlier in that chapter in Numbers, it is very, very likely that Joshua had seen Jericho when they went in before. I think it's really amazing that the 10 scared spies come out, they whip everybody up into a frenzy over these walled cities. Because they assumed if the walls were high, they could never get in. But you fast forward the 40 years, and here's Joshua's generation, and they show up, and Rahab is letting them know, actually, we're behind the walls because we are so scared of Israel. We could stop right there, and I could probably go 3 or 4 weeks on just that one thought. The idea that at one point the children of Israel had seen those walls and they were so scared and they said, oh, this means we could never win. But you fast forward and now that those people know the God who is with them, suddenly those walls are not a problem for Israel. They're a problem for the Canaanites. See, Rahab told them in Joshua 2:10 and 11, we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. 2 events had frightened the Canaanites: the parting of the Red Sea and the annihilation of Sihon and Og. The first could be attributed to no man at all. Obviously, only God could split the Red Sea. The second was proof that God was with them, but what it told the Canaanites is that this was a formidable army. The part where Rahab says, as soon as, certainly makes it sound as though they found out about the Red Sea and the destruction of the kings at the same time. So let's get our timeline straight. Under Moses' administration, when the 12 spies went in, they saw the walled cities, they saw the tall people, they were terrified. At that point, the Canaanites probably didn't know about the Red Sea yet. And then after that, these kings are destroyed, and now in the next generation they come in, and now they know about the Red Sea and the destruction of the kings. That part where she says, as soon as, tells us that when they heard about those 2 events, they locked themselves up in the fortress. They were scared. Now listen to the Lord's reply to Joshua in Joshua 6:2. I know I'm bouncing around, but I'll slow down in a second. This is the Lord's response to the fact that the city was shut up. The Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hands, its kings and its mighty men of valor. Securely shut up doesn't mean what we think it means. In Hebrew, the word is sargar, and it is a verb that marks the decisive moment when something or someone passes one sphere of control to another, whether shelter, judgment, stewardship, or warfare. It didn't just mean they locked the door. It meant the battle was already won. And so the Lord says to Joshua, he's not being metaphorical. He's literally saying, look what this means for you. He knew that the locked gates meant what I just told you it meant, that the control was already handed over. The last time Joshua stood in this land with fellow spies, they were so scared of tall peoples and high walls. But tall people are not a threat if they're afraid. And high walls are no match for a big God. The Israelites at this point already know that the people inside of Jericho are scared. But the thing about high walls means, even though they know people are scared, they don't know how they're reacting to the fear on the inside. Did the people shut down in fear? Were they crying in a fetal position? Or did they react by stockpiling weapons? Were they waiting just inside the door? The Israelites could not know that, but who knew it? God knew what was happening inside of the walls. That's the thing about our big, big God. He sits high, he looks low. It didn't matter if those walls were 5 million feet high into the sky. God is still above them. He can still see down into it. He's still right there because our God is not even bound by time and space. He's actually there seeing what's going on. So that's why our commander can give a command that we don't know what to do, and he does. God knew the only thing between Israel and total victory was these stones. So how much of a challenge were the stones? I'm going to take a couple minutes and look at this from an archaeological perspective. Archaeological findings from Jericho have been used to piece together how the wall was actually constructed. The first thing you should know about Jericho is that it's also known as Tel Satan because it was built on a tell. A tell is a mound, but it's not a mound made of earth. It's built on the ruins of civilizations. So when one civilization was conquered or abandoned, the next group would come in and level that city and just build on top of it. That's what Jericho was on. Resulting tells had steep slopes and flat tops. Bonus information. This is why if you ever look at a map of the Middle East, a lot of cities start with the word tell because they're usually built on one of these mounds. Now around Jericho, there was a retaining wall. That retaining wall was 12 to 15 feet high. This is probably why the Lord had us not have church for 2 weeks so I could get this thing put together. Because I didn't want to steal the picture I saw on the internet and it wasn't very good quality anyways. If you look at that right side of the picture, the lighter gray, I'm not quitting my day job to be a designer, don't worry. The bottom part that's lighter gray, that would represent a retaining wall that was around the city. The retaining wall was 12 to 15 feet high. On top of that, the darker gray is a mud brick wall. It was 6 feet thick and 20 to 25 feet high. At the top of that slope, you see another wall. That's a mud brick wall at the top, and it topped out at 46 feet above the ground level outside of that lower retaining wall. There were common war strategies to conquer the walled city, and the one that made the most sense was just waiting them out, especially because they knew they were scared. We'll just wait, they'll starve, or they'll have to come out eventually. They could have surrounded the city, starved them out, but their commander had a unique plan. We're now in Joshua 6, 3 through 5, the moment we've been waiting for I don't know how many months. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. The 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times. The priests shall blow the trumpets. And it shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. And then the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up. Everybody say, go up. Go up, every man straight before him. Joshua takes that instruction to the priest first, and then he takes it to the people, and then they carry out the plan. So every day for 6 days, they go marching one time around these walls. And I told you it's not a very big area. They could have knocked it all out in one day, but that's not what the commander said to do. And for 6 days, they make a lap in silence, other than those priests, which are blowing the trumpet if you keep reading. But on the 7th day, Joshua 6:20 says, so the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets, and it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout. That word shout had 2 purposes. It was a war cry, but it was also a shout of praise. We know that because of the verb in the original language that could mean to mar with breaking, to figuratively split the ears, or to shout. And the shout, by definition, could be either a shout of alarm or a shout of joy. And it was both in this case. Then the end of Joshua 6:20 says that after that shout, the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. The way the wall falls matters. This is important, and it is archaeologically verified. What fell was that 20 to 25 foot mud wall at the top. The retaining wall was still intact. The 12 to 15 foot see, now we have them rocks now represent that other part at the top. I told you I can quit my day job. The retaining wall was still there. It was the mud part that fell. This, again, is archaeologically verified. So if they still had that 12 to 15 foot wall, how did they get in? Well, because God was sovereign over this. The way they fell made a ramp. And that's why it says that the men were able to run straight before them and that they were able to run up into the city. They literally ran up those bricks into the city to take it. They ran in, they destroyed everything in the city except for one household we'll talk about maybe next week. Then they burned the city down. That's another fact that is archaeologically verified. So now that you've got this data, let's apply it to our lives. I gave you so much information, I know. You can sort it out later. But I want us to now apply it because what's the purpose of this account being in the Bible? Is it so that we can have some songs that we like to sing? Is it so that we can have something that pinpoints the importance of worship and shouting? Is it so we can be terrified growing up in a Pentecostal church? Every time you brought a friend, afraid a Jericho march was going to break out and people were going to start marching around the room? Was that the purpose? No. Let's apply it to our lives. The Apostle Paul warned about the fortress or the stronghold of our enemy in 2 Corinthians 10, 3-6. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God, for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. Here's what I know about spiritual warfare. I know that we fight from victory, not for victory. How many times have I said this? It is a fixed fight. We know that the winning side is God's side. It's just a matter of which side you're going to sign up for. And if you're on the Lord's side, then we can go into every battle with confidence, knowing the victory has already been provided. We know that because 1 Corinthians 15, 56 and 57 tells us the sting of death is sin and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. And Colossians 2:15 tells us how, having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. See, the victory is already ours because we are promised that we are more than conquerors through Christ Jesus who loved us. Our foe is already defeated, he's already disarmed, and he has been publicly shamed. So how in the world does a loser like that continue to have so much effect on our lives? Remember, when Paul wrote these words, he talked about the pulling down of the strongholds. He was talking to the church. That tells me that even people who have joined the winning side in an already won fight continue to face a scenario of the enemy's attacks. How does it happen? Paul told us how. Through strongholds set in the mind. How do I know it's the mind? Because that's where arguments start and where imaginations and thoughts live. From inside this fort in our minds, the enemy can intimidate us. He can hurl insults at us. He can have us tangled up in anxieties, and he can convince us that our God is either unable or unwilling to save us. So let's look at our similarities between Jericho and the enemy's fortress in our minds. Number one, just like Jericho, the stronghold is built on a tell. Jericho had a high starting place because it was built on layer after layer of ruins. The space occupied by the enemy in your mind is built on a tell. The fortress of Jericho had that high spot because of what had been ruined before. The enemy of your soul plots the same way. Where does he build? On top of whatever he can level. If he can demolish the trust you have in your spouse, then that's a spot he can set up a stronghold. And I'm going to throw this one in here. The majority of the time he accomplishes that because sin enters into marriage and makes it where you have to be suspicious and you have to ask some questions. But what was the cause of that? Sin. You see how the devil just snuck in? That's how he starts demolishing things. We let sin into our lives. We let sin into our marriages. We let sin into our partnerships. And that's how he comes in and he starts mowing down every good thing that we have. And he says, I think this is a good spot for my fort. If he can demolish the faith you have in the body of Christ, he can set up a stronghold there. And I tell you, day in and day out, it's easier and easier for him to build that one. If he can demolish that faith and make a stronghold, from inside of that stronghold, he can make you believe all preachers are the same, all Christians are hypocrites, that there's no reason to go be around them. And it can seem right when he says it. If he can demolish the hope that you have that God is in control, that becomes a spot for a stronghold. If he can level your hope and build that fortress from inside, he can convince you that tomorrow will be darker than today, and the morning is not worthy of sticking around to see. The devil cannot read your mind. It's a really pitiful, I'm not even going to call it a doctrine. That's a pitiful teaching I hear from people. The devil can't read your mind. That's crazy. But he sure enough can project some thoughts into it, especially if you let him set up space. This is why we collectively ask every week for the Lord to search our hearts. We're asking the Lord to survey the land, to see, is there a spot the devil has picked out? Is there a spot where he's begun to level out with hurt with a bad attitude, with bitterness, with anger. Those things inside of us, they become the prime real estate for the enemy to build his stronghold. Number 2, just like Jericho, the stronghold has to be demolished before the enemy can be trampled. Starving out the enemy at Jericho was not an option. And archaeologically, they actually were able to find the proof of how much food they actually had stored up in there. But the thing is, every day, if Jericho was just surrounded and they were just waiting on them to come out, number 1, every day that they let the enemy do that, the enemy could have been inside making a plan of attack. Number 2, every day they were in there was another day that they could have begun to hurl taunts and insults to the children of Israel as they circled around the fortress. And more importantly, in my opinion, every day they spent thinking, I'll just wait the enemy out, was a day they were missing the appointments that God had for them in the promised land. Waiting them out was not an option. Waiting our enemy out is not an option. Starving him out is not an option because he won't shut his mouth. And every day you let him live there unbothered, he's going to run that mouth. And he will run you down if you don't stop him. Waiting him out is not an option because in spiritual matters, silence is consent. As a defeated foe, he can only do what you allow him to do. And as long as you give safe harbor to the enemy, you let him run that mouth, he will continue. Number 3. Just like Jericho, the enemy knows the power of the God who is with us. We forget that one sometimes. Another really bad teaching people have accepted is that the devil is God's equal. Oh, no, he is not. He is a created being. He's not eternal. He doesn't know everything. He can't be everywhere. What a ridiculous notion. You say, well, I don't believe that he's equal. You might not believe it, but you might be acting like it. We are not helpless in this battle. The moment we start marching like God is with us is the moment the foundations of the enemy's fortress begin to shake. Why? James 2:19 tells us, even the demons of hell know there is one God and they tremble at the fact of his existence. The foundations of the fortress of the enemy, they shake from the inside out, starting with the devil shaking in his trashy boots on the inside. Number 4, just like Jericho, when we carry out our commander's word, we cannot be stopped. Psalm 18:29 through 34. For by you I can run against a troop. By my God, I can leap over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is proven. He is a shield to all who trust in him. For who is God except the Lord? Who is a rock except our God? It is God who arms me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer, and he sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. Do you see what happened? God's way is perfect. And the psalmist goes on to say, because his way is perfect, it's going to make my way perfect. Because my way comes into alignment with his way. And when my way comes into alignment with his way, he makes my feet, this translation says, like the feet of a deer. It means it's able to climb up that mountain. It's able to climb up that wall and go conquer something on the inside. But it's not going to happen in our way. It happens when we align with his way. 5, just like Jericho, when the walls of the enemy's stronghold crumble, the work is not done yet. The last time we were together, what was that, 2014? I gave you my impression of worship leaders who make this story about them. I've been in so many services where people yell and they carry on about strongholds coming down. They celebrate like that means the work is done. They say somebody's been freed from the devil. Like it was the devil who had held them captive in it. Now, we are held captive in our sin, that's true. But by Paul's word, it's the devil who's inside of something in our mind. Go back to Paul's words. He says you got to pull down those strongholds. And the problem is that in those really exciting services, and I'll tell you, there's been times I've been caught up in the emotion of it too. In those really exciting services, when you hear people screaming and carrying on all that stuff, and I'm not saying that's for another day. But it's like, oh, glory, hallelujah. All's done. Service is over. Where are we going to go eat at? Because somebody got an emotional release in a moment. The strongholds come down so the real work can be done. What's the work? Paul already told you. Pulling a stronghold was just the start. After the stronghold comes down, we got to run up in there. After the stronghold comes down, it's time to get up in there and to destroy the enemy. And make sure he can't come back. People make the height of this story when the walls came down. But they didn't just let the walls come down and then march on off to the next place. Israel ran inside. They destroyed all the people except for the one household. They killed the animals. They took the silver and the gold and the vessels for the house of the Lord. And then they burned the city to the ground. It's the same way that people think the story with David and Goliath, that the climax is the rock hitting them. That's not the exciting part. The exciting part is when he goes over and chops his head off. If he doesn't chop his head off, all he's done is give him a nap. And if we just rejoice and we say the strongholds came down, but we don't go in and hog tie the devil and tell him you're done now. If we don't do that, all we've done is given people a spiritual nap. And you know what happens when they take a spiritual nap? The devil's going to sneak right back in. And they're not going to notice. The walls didn't fall for nothing. The walls fell to become the ramp to defeating the enemy. When the walls of that stronghold in your mind come down, it's an important step. We should celebrate. We should rejoice. But we ought not to rest on our laurels and say all the work is done. 6. There can be no rebuilding on bad land. There's a curse that gets pronounced on whomever rebuilt on the idolatrous land of Jericho. But because we're dealing with a spiritual entity, we must be aware he is going to make every effort to rebuild in your mind. We need something to occupy that space so he can't rebuild. But the problem is that we can't just put up a new fort on the same spot. Otherwise, the enemy will think it's for him. We need new land. We don't need the old idolatrous land. And that's part of the problem of the strongholds are done, so we're done. No, you're not done. Because Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Again, he was talking to Christians. Transform your mind. What a foolish thought that we could tear down the walls but not change the landscape of our mind and think he ain't never going to come back. He thinks it's his now. We must have a renewed mind. We must have a mind that doesn't think like this world. We must have a mind that doesn't give place for the roots of bitterness and anger and hurt and the things that get us pulled back in over and over and over again. And once we have the new land of our mind, good land, we must build a new fortress. Proverbs 18:10 tells us what the fortress is. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and they are safe. Psalm 18:2-3 says, the Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God, my strength, in whom I will trust. My shield, the horn of salvation, my stronghold. I will call upon the name of the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. Psalm 91:2, I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him I will trust. Psalm 62:5-6, my soul, wait patiently for God alone, for my expectation is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. This is why we've got to be aware. I know they don't realize what they're saying, but when you get to those services, and they say, every stronghold's coming down, every stronghold, you got to have one, sugar pop. One stronghold's got to be there. Because if you take out all the strongholds of the devil, but you don't disciple and say, now we are going to build up the stronghold for the Lord so that he occupies the space in our new, renewed mind, the devil's coming back. And here's what's going to happen when you give him your entire renewed mind and you let him have the only fortress there. Isaiah 26:3-5. This is one of my favorite verses. You've heard me say it often. And I'm going to just toss this. This is free. I'm not going to charge y'all for this. I've been very honest with you all with the struggles I've had with my mental health over the years. Even when I was a Christian, even when I was a pastor, even when I was a minister. This verse has been transformative in my life. So if you have those struggles, this is a verse to know. Speaking to the Lord. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for in Yah, the Lord is everlasting strength. For he brings down those who dwell high, the lofty city, he lays it low to the ground, and he brings it down to the dust. That sounds almost like it lines right up with what Paul said we had to do. To tear down the strongholds, but you've also got to take captive those thoughts. How are you going to take captive thoughts? You're not going to take captive thoughts. You're going to have a stronghold that the Lord is in, and he's going to take captive those thoughts. And that he's going to destroy anything that tries to enter into your mind, because it's now his. I don't want you to have an open mind. I don't want you to have a closed mind. I want you to have a full mind. I want your mind full of the Word. I want your mind so full of the Word and so full of the Spirit of God that there is literally no place for the enemy there. So here's my concluding question to you. Are you living in perfect peace? If you're not living in perfect peace, based on that verse I just told you, it's a fair question to ask. If you're not in perfect peace, then is there maybe a tell in your mind where the enemy is setting up? I want to be abundantly clear. I always try to be careful on this subject. I just said it, but I'll say it again. I am not questioning your salvation. I'm not saying that if you have some turmoil in your mind or difficulties in your mind, then you're not saved, because if you were saved, you wouldn't have this. I'm not saying that. And that's an undue burden that some preachers put on people. I'm not saying that to you at all. But what I am saying is that if there's chaos in your mind, it's going to make it really easy for the enemy to move in. What I am saying is that when there's chaos in your mind, and you say, but I love the Lord, I don't doubt that. I'm not doubting that. As a person who was able to get up in my previous employment, and I could get up and preach, and I could preach it so good and so right, and be on the money, and go home and be curled up in a fetal position on the ground and not able to get up. As someone who has went through those kind of struggles to the degree that I had a job where I was paid by the church, I would do the duties that I was supposed to, and then I would literally go have to lock myself in a room because I could not take what was happening in my mind. And I loved the Lord, and the Lord loved me. And I was on my way to heaven. I don't doubt that. So don't let the devil, that lying, no good loser in trashy boots, tell you that I said otherwise. I'm saying this because I care enough to tell you the truth. Here's what happens when there's chaos in your mind. It gives the enemy space to come in and start leveling out. Is God really able? Does God really care? There's a story in the Bible where a man's son, he was demon possessed, and they couldn't get any relief. And the father brings him for help, and Jesus says to him, he says, if you'll believe, he can be healed. And he says, I do believe, but help me with my unbelief. Can I tell you the difference between that little piece that has an unbelief? I think that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you happens in your mind. That I believe, but I've got some unbelief. It looks like, God, I know you can, but I'm not sure you will. God, I know you're able, but I don't know that you're willing for me. And that's enough to make the devil think he can set up in your mind. And once he sets up in your mind, he will create absolute chaos. Because then he'll have the fortress, and from inside it, he can just run that mouth and make you think there's nothing you can do to stop it. And the devil is a liar. He is the father of all lies. The truth is not in him. If you are a child of God, he has absolutely no right to your mind. He has no authority in your life. I talk awful big about this stuff. You know why? Because I'm sick and tired of seeing what he does. Because I'm mad at how many months I lost curled up in a fetal position. I'm mad how many times I locked myself in a room. I'm mad how many days I missed with my child because I just couldn't handle anymore. I'm mad about that, and I don't want anybody else to go through that. So I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, you don't have to live that way. I'm not condemning you, but I am telling you that the devil is a defeated foe, so stop acting like you're condemned. Stop acting like you're hopeless. You're not hopeless. So what are we going to do? How uplifting, Lindsay. It is. It might not feel it, but let me tell you something. Once you get your renewed mind, you're going to know how uplifting this was right now. We're going to pray like we always do. Lord, search my heart. But you're going to get specific this time. Lord, show me if I've got to tell. Lord, show me if there's something in me, Lord, that the devil has leveled out some part of me. And he set up some imagination, some things that aren't even real. That he started to make me doubt what you're able to do. He's made me doubt if you care about me, Lord. He's put doubt into my mind, Lord, if you're real. Lord, I'm just going to be honest with you right now. And Lindsay is not telling you that you're having to search that because it's sin to have questions. Lindsay is telling you it will lead to sin if you're not vigilant. So be vigilant today.